everybody, this is the Shy Genealogist again, and we're going to start filling in our family land sheet. Whenever I start with a blank family land sheet, the first thing I want to do is rename it so that I don't lose my blank form. For this example, I'm just going to collect all information that I can find about John Smiths, and I don't necessarily know which John Smith this is. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, and then we'll start adding in some information. As I go through my documents and I look at different deeds and land grants and whatever, I'm going to add as much information as I can. So the first thing that I want to show you is how to insert some lines into our form, because we're probably going to have more than 2 or 3 land transactions. You can place your cursor in any cell that's in a line, come up to the Table Tools under the Layout tab, and we're going to tell it to insert a line above. Now, whichever line your cursor is in, the formatting for that line is going to duplicate into the new line. So that's going to be something to consider if you have an example like this. This bottom row has 2 cells that have not been merged yet, and if I click in this line and go up to Layout and insert above, notice that the new line also has 2 cells that have not been merged together, and it also has that bottom border. To get rid of the border, I'm going to highlight the line. I'm going to come to my Design tab, back to where we were looking at borders earlier. And as I scroll down through the list, I get a little bit of a preview. If I turn off the bottom border, that means I've turned off all borders completely. As I go down the list, I might see if there's another option that's going to give me what I'm looking for. And right now I don't see anything, so I am going to turn off the bottom border. But then I'm going to go ahead and turn back on a 1/2 point thickness bottom border. And then that will give me the look that I'm looking for again. While I'm here, I'm going to merge these cells like we've done before. Table Tools, Layout, and merge those cells. So now I don't have to worry about that anymore. We're going to begin entering some information into our chart, and I have highlighted all of these cells and changed my font size to be a 9, a little bit smaller than everything else we have in here. That's just going to help things fit a little better. And the first document that I'm looking at is from a Kentucky land grant. As I come across and work my way through these columns, the land grant that I'm looking at has 1,000 acres. And this specific John Smith has paid £400 for this 1,000 acres of land. Now, there is no symbol on the keyboard for pounds, so I'm going to use an Alt code. In this case, I'm going to hold down my Alt button, and while I'm holding it down, I'm going to type in 156. When I release my Alt key, that pound sign shows up. There's a whole list of Alt codes on the internet, and I'll try to include a link in my blog to some different Alt codes. If you were interested and if you ever needed it, Alt 155 would give you a cent symbol. But in this case, we need the pound sign, so Alt 156 gives me the pound. In this case, John Smith is purchasing a land grant from James Wiley. So as I read it, I see that James Wiley has assigned this land to John Smith. And I want to remember that name, James Wiley, because that will probably come back in future land transactions, and it'll help me tell when 2 men are the same. There are also a couple of dates in this particular land grant, so I'm going to go ahead and note November 1779 was mentioned, and also the 19th of February 1780. At this time I don't know exactly what those dates refer to, but I do want to keep that information handy. John Smith is not selling the land, so I'm not going to have anything in this sold column. When I go ahead and read through the grant, I see that there are a couple of witnesses. Those are William McAfee and William McBrayer. In my comments section, I can include any kind of information that I want, but for now, I'm going to include that it says this land is near Jacob Froman's Sound. So I don't know if that's going to be a neighbor, but that's the kind of information that I want to include. Now this particular document is pretty short. That's all the information that I have. I'm going to fill in a few more lines and I'll be back in a moment to show you some new tricks. Alright, I've typed in a few more lines of information here, and there are some things that are new and some things that are exactly the same. So let's look at a few things here. I've tried to keep things in chronological order as much as I can. So I've got some dates here: 1780, 1782, 82, and 87. And one thing that I know is that Mercer County, Kentucky was formed during this time. Mercer County was formed in 1785, and that's something in my timeline that I might want to take note of, because if I have some information that came before the formation of a county, I need to look somewhere else. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a line. I'm going to insert a line above where I have Mercer. All these cells are already highlighted. I'm just going to merge those cells, and I'm going to put a note in here that Mercer County was formed August 8th, 1875, and it was part of Lincoln County, which used to be called Old Crab Orchard, and that's when Harrodsburg became the county seat of Mercer County. So that's all information that might help me know where to look for additional records before 1875. We're going to look at a few other things here. Notice that in my comments column I've added a few additional types of information, and the first thing is, because this particular grant or deed is in a meets and bounds format, I do have the first line of the meets and bounds descriptions, and I could include them all, but some of these are quite a long list. So if I include the very first one, when that portion of the land is sold, that description will more than likely be copied into the next deed, and that can help me match up when one piece of land is sold. So that's one thing that I've added. Here I've added a note that this particular grant said that this John Smith was an assignee of James Wiley, so I know that this John Smith and this John Smith are the same man. It tells me that this land was surveyed on the 23rd of October 1780, and it tells me that it runs near a watercourse called Cane Run. Now water courses are very important if you're comparing to tax records, because in many of the early years they had to tell which watercourse they were near when they were paying their taxes. So that can also help me match a piece of land to a specific John Smith. Another thing you'll notice down here, this next grant mentioned that this had a Treasury warrant number 33, and it was issued the 19th of February 1780, and that date happens to match this date. So these two entries are for the same land as this one is. I just need to find some more details. I noticed that this is 400 acres and this is 1,000 acres. Over here I've indicated that the 400 pounds that was paid was the total for 1,400 acres. So this 400 acre piece plus this 1,000 acre piece. It was purchased in 1782. And I've got some witnesses listed, as well as people who were mentioned as neighbors. These are things that I'm going to want to know when I'm analyzing to try to match men with the same name to see which piece of land belongs with which man. Now down here below, we've got a deed from Mercer County, Kentucky. And in this case, this John Smith sold the land to John Hagan in 1787. And anytime land is sold, then the name of the wife is almost always included in the deed as well. So this tells me that his wife's name was Martha. That's a really important piece of information, because you know it is so hard to find those names of wives. So I've decided that whenever I see information about a wife, I want that information to really jump out at me. I'm going to make sure that that print is in red. I can't at this time indicate that Martha was this John Smith's wife for now I'm just going to collect all my information, and then eventually if I find other wives mentioned, I might try to start separating out the files. Let's do a little more formatting to make this easier to read. I've got witnesses and I've got people who were mentioned, and I kind of want that to stand out. So I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to use my mini menu here. I'm going to bold it, and I also want to underline it. Control U will help you, is a keyboard shortcut for underlining, or you could use the menu up here at the top. So I'm going to bold and underline where it says witnesses and where it says mentioned. That just kind of sets that off inside of each box and makes it a little bit easier to read. Bold and underline. Bold and underline. And bold and underline. And another thing that I've found as I've worked in my different charts is that if I don't find something, I better write down that there was none listed. Otherwise, I'm just going to think that I forgot, and I would go back and look at it again. So I'm going to come back up to the top and indicate that there was no one else mentioned in this land grant. So I want to take this, bold it, and underline it. So now I've got some information in the chart, and I just think these witnesses and people that are mentioned might stand out a little bit better if I could bullet them. So I'm going to highlight these two names up here under witnesses, and I'm going to come right up here under the Home tab to the paragraph section, and I'm going to click on the bullet button. Now this is obviously further over than I would like, so I'm going to use this decrease indent button. I'm going to push it back, but I would still like to see maybe a smaller bullet. So if I click this down arrow next to the bullets, it gives me several options. If you don't see something here that you like, you can tell it to define a new bullet. And if you look at the symbols, you've got different things to choose from. So I don't want this great big bullet. I want this little bitty bullet. So I'm going to click on that and say OK. OK. So now they've got that little bitty bullet, but I would like for these letters to be a little bit closer to the bullet. So if I come up here to the ruler, if I click on this square and slide it back and forth, it moves everything, including the bullets. If I click on this little house on the top, it just moves the text. And now to me that looks much better. It's a little bit set off. I've got some bullets there to kind of show that this is a list of things, but it's not an overwhelming bullet. Now I've gone to quite a bit of work to come up with that type of bullet and that exact spacing that I want. I would rather not have to do that for everything. So if I highlight these and I come up here in the Home tab and click on this little paintbrush called Format Painter, it remembers all of the settings that I've used to create everything that I've highlighted. Now whatever I highlight next will get the exact same settings, the exact same bullet size and indents and everything. But notice if I try to highlight another section, it doesn't keep the formatting. So if you want to use it multiple times, highlight your text with the formatting that you like, then double click on the Format Painter, and it will hold that formatting until you have gone through all of the different sections that you want to apply that formatting to. And when you're finished with it, click on the button again and that turns it off. So now you can go through and take a look at this and decide if there are areas that you would like to bold or change the font size of. You can apply some bullets. And when we come back next time, we're going to talk about things we can do to start analyzing this and how we can give ourselves citations and start a little to-do list and things like that that will just help this process as we're going through and analyzing information from all the various deeds and grants that we can find for anyone named John Smith. I hope this tutorial has been helpful to you, and I thank you very much for watching.